Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Theravada Buddhism series, Dhamma Talk 31. Life Continuum. Bhavanga. Bhavanga. B-H-A-V-A-N-G-A. Bhavanga is a compound word combining bhava, which means life, and anga, which means part. So together, a part of life. It doesn't represent the whole life, but it constitutes as a part of life. It is a resultant consciousness and is identical to the relinking consciousness. Relinking consciousness is the first consciousness of a life. Bhavanga arises and disappears one after the other, as if vibrating throughout life. As long as it occurs and passes away, one after another, a person is alive. When it ceases, a person is dead. Maybe it can be called life controlling faculty, because they are vital. Now, the personalities in every existence at birth, not the whole life that you are forming, but the personality that comes in with the person at birth is different. You will see some children are happy, some are miserable, some are very short-tempered, and some have been serious since childhood. They are not conditioned by the environment. Since they were born, some scream and yell non-stop, some smiling, some serious. These are the personalities that comes from the past life. Maybe it is a reflection of Bhavanga. Bhavanga of each life is different from others, but they are related to each other through causal relationship. To make that a little clearer, We all know computer. Okay. There's a window operating software 7, Windows 7, and operating system Windows 8. They are two different products, but they are related through causal relationship. It is built upon the 7, modify the 7 and become 8. That 8 may be better, or it may be corrupted and become worse. You don't know. Bhavanga is like in a deep sleep, totally unconscious. When you are in a deep sleep, you are not aware of anything, not even a dream. Totally unconscious. That's how Bhavanga is like. And in fact, while you are sleeping, Bhavanga is playing. However, you are aware of things, events, and actions. When you wake up, in waking moments, we perceived that consciousness, mental factors, and sense objects are continuously working together, non-stop. When we are awake, we think we are aware of every moment, everything around. That's how we perceived. However, one thought process arises, disappear. One thought process arises, disappear, and is buffered. And is buffered by 3 moments of Bhavanga. Before the following thought process. What it means is, one thought process arises, and before the next thought process come in, there's a little gap filled with 3 moments of Bhavanga, life continuum or life constituent. But we are not aware of that buffer zone or buffer Bhavanga, because the speed of consciousness is faster than many billionth of a second. Even 1 second, it is very hard for us to really pinpoint. Billionth of a second. That's why we are not aware of the operation of Bhavanga from one thought to the other, one thought process to the other. We know these things, what we are talking and discussing, because Buddha had taught us. Only Buddha could see one consciousness at a time in sequence. He sees, he knows, he taught us, so we understand, at least intellectually, how the consciousness or thought process operates. The connection between the unconscious mind and conscious mind is actually quite fascinating. A person is constantly engaging with sense object at awakening moments. So, when a sense object comes in contact with the sense organ, meaning a form comes in contact with the eyes, sound come in contact with the ears, and so on, come in contact with the sense organ, that contact strikes the Bhavanga. Mentally, of course, it strikes the Bhavanga, life continuum. And at that moment, life continuum got shaken. But that striking, that contact takes 3 thought movements. In other words, 3 Bhavanga. Upon striking, the first simply already disappear. That means we can call it past Bhavanga. And the second one and third one, let's call it vibrate. In other words, second one arises and passes away. And then the third arises and passed away. Or you can say ceased, the third one ceased. So when the sense object strike, it takes about 3 Bhavanga to actually stop, because so fast. The momentum is about 3 moments. So the third one totally ceased. And then the flow of the life continuum ceased. The flow ceased. So whenever a sense object strikes the Bhavanga, it takes 3 moments of Bhavanga to cease, and totally and completely the flow of the life continuum or Bhavanga ceased. Or stop. Let's call it stop. The flow stop. When it stops, it will restart. Then a different type of consciousness arises. Bhavanga doesn't rise anymore because it stopped. The flow stopped. A different kind of consciousness arises. That different kind of consciousness turns. What does it do? It turns or adverts towards the physical sense door where the object strikes. Let's say it's a sound. The mind turns towards the ear door. The form, the mind turns towards the eye door. Because that's where the object is. It's a mental object now. Even though it is a physical object from outside, striking the internal or physical sense door, now it's become a mental figure, image. So that consciousness turns towards the physical sense door where the object strikes. And that consciousness is called sense door adverting consciousness. Sense door adverting consciousness. And then last Dharma talk, we talk about this particular consciousness. Now you know how it comes to be. And then this consciousness, it does its job. And when it is doing the job, it does its job without any roots. You know what 6 roots are already. It does its job without any roots. Therefore, this consciousness is rootless, no root, functional, kariya, consciousness, citta. It is a sense door adverting consciousness is a rootless, functional consciousness. In your ear, you might sound like rootless, R-U-T-H, but it is rootless, R-O-T. Just my accent. After that, sense consciousness arises. After that adverting consciousness, sense consciousness arises. Basically, it is the awareness of the object. You remember when we are practicing meditation, seeing, hearing, smelling. That is the sense consciousness. And if it is eye, we say eye consciousness or seeing consciousness. If it is sound, we say hearing consciousness or ear consciousness. So that one arises after the adverting. You turn and then you see or you hear. Next arises receiving consciousness. Basically, that consciousness accepts the object or the sound or the form or the smell. It received or it accepts that sense object called receiving consciousness. And then the next consciousness investigate that sense object. Investigate. And as it investigates, it is called investigating consciousness. That's all. Each consciousness has their own job or function. They simply do their job. So these three, sense consciousness, receiving consciousness, and investigating consciousness. These three are rootless, resultant consciousness. Vipaka citta. Ahetuka vipaka citta. Rootless, resultant consciousness. Those three. And then the next one is determining consciousness. It determines after investigating. What does it investigate? It very simple, not complex. Whether it is good or bad, whether it is pleasant or unpleasant. That's it. good or bad, or pleasant or unpleasant. So its function is to discriminate the sense object, whether it's in a good category or bad category, or a pleasant category or unpleasant category. And that's called determining consciousness. But at that point, the person is reflecting at the mind door about that object. It is not the first encounter. It is the recall in the mind, reflecting, thinking about that object to determine whether it is good or bad. It is determining at the mind door. That's why it is also known as mind door adverting consciousness. You heard it in the last Dhamma talk. Mind door adverting consciousness. Both names, whether you call it determining consciousness or mind door adverting consciousness, they are one and the same. So this one is not vipaka, not resultant. This one is, first of all, it is rootless. Rootless means it has no 6 roots. Functional, kriya, consciousness, citta. Ahetuka, kriya, citta. Rootless, functional consciousness. Now we are calling it by its quality. When we say it is determining or investigating, we are calling that consciousness by its function. What does it really do at that moment? And what kind of qualities it has? 2 different approaches for the same consciousness. Up to this point, these consciousnesses are all non-karmic producing passive consciousness. Okay? Bhavanga, they are resultant. Sense door, functional. Sense consciousness, receiving, investigating, they are resultant. This determining is kriya, functional. All of them cannot produce any new karma. In other words, resultant consciousness cannot produce new karma. Functional consciousness cannot produce new karma. So up to this point, altogether 8 now. Up to this point, they are non-karmic producing consciousness, or you can call passive consciousness. Next, after that, next, a wholesome or unwholesome action is executed based on a person's attitude on the object's good or bad, pleasant or unpleasant nature. The objects are as they are. Good object is good, bad object is bad. Pleasant object is pleasant, unpleasant object is unpleasant. They are as they are as it is as it is. But it is the attitude of the person that is engaging that object. Based on the attitude of the person, wholesome actions will be executed or unwholesome actions will be executed. So at this stage, that is what's happening after the determining consciousness. Pleasant object. What are you going to do with it, basically? And some will do it in a wholesome way, some will do it in an unwholesome way. And that type of consciousness is in Pali called Javana Citta. Javana, Javana Citta. In English, it's called swift consciousness or impulsion. That is what it is translated in the book, so I just repeat it. Swift consciousness or impulsion. What it really is, this consciousness experienced the object. This consciousness experience the object and it produced karma because it is action now, actually executing kusala action, wholesome, akusala action, unwholesome. When you are executing, when you are doing, by engaging with the object, you are producing or forming karma. So this is the active zone of consciousness. The other is the passive zone, which means no karmic actions. Active zone, karmic actions are produced. So two zones. Actually, these Javana Citta, swift consciousness, are 7 of them. One after the other, the same time arises. Of course, intensity different. They go one after the other. They swiftly appear and disappear. That's why it's called swift consciousness, quick consciousness. Karma producing consciousness, active consciousness. These Javana Citta, where karma is formed, also Buddha and Arhat does the same consciousness. But for Buddha and Arhat, this particular consciousness is neither wholesome or unwholesome. But functional, because Buddha and Arahant has totally abandoned craving and ignorance. Once you have abandoned completely craving and ignorance, once they have uprooted the kilesa, they do not produce any more kusala, wholesome, and akusala, unwholesome nature anymore. Because of that, even though they are doing the same function of wholesome and unwholesome consciousness, they do not produce karma. That is why it is called Kriya Citta for Buddha and Arahant. After a series of 7 swift consciousness ceased, after it ceased, 2 thought moments of registering consciousness arose. It registered, these consciousness register, or let's say store in the memory bank of the experience. It's stored. Whether right or wrong doesn't matter. It's simply stored. That is the last 2 consciousness called registering consciousness. Register the experience. Thus, it completes a 17 thought moments, which is called a thought process. VT. So I'll just give a very short run on a simile in the scripture, how these 7 thought moments are explained. A person is sleeping under a mango tree. At that moment, that means 3 Bhavanga is in operation. 3 Bhavanga, sleeping under a mango tree. A sound of a falling object strikes the ear. Good. So in other words, it wakes you up. Boom! Something fall down. So automatically the attention turn towards that sound. Where is it? You hear with the ear. That is the sense door adverting consciousness. Attention simply turning to that sound. Woke up. Which is the ear door. That's the third, the 4th consciousness. And then open the eyes and see what it is. So when you open the eyes and look at what it is, see the falling object, which is a mango. That is the seeing consciousness. See the mango, seeing consciousness. And then the person stretches the hand and pick it up. That's a receiving consciousness. Right? Accepting the mango, receiving the mango. And after that, it squeeze and poke and check the mango, whether they are bugs or rotten and so on. That is the investigating consciousness. And after investigation, you decided, oh, this is great, perfect, good. No bugs, not rotten, and it is just ripe to eat. It is ripe. That is determining consciousness. Uttapana citta. Then after he determines it, goes into action. He eats. He ate the whole mango. Eats and eats and eats. The mango till it's completely gone. That is experiencing the flavor of the mango. Eating is actually experiencing the flavor of the mango. That is 7 swift consciousness, 7 Javana Jeta. Now the mango is gone. He licks the fingers of both hands because they are so delicious. He licked both hands and then swallow it. That is the 2 registering consciousness. Altogether, 17 thought movements. After that, he went back to sleep, meaning Bhavanga comes back, 3 Bhavanga. That is the simile explained in the scripture for us to understand this thought process. Viti, which constitutes 17 thought movements. Billions of thought processes, not just consciousness, one process after the other, 17 in full. Billions of thought processes take place at a snap of a finger. That fast, that kind of speed and momentum it has. And it is essential for us to know a particular type of consciousness in full so that we understand the upcoming Dharma talks related to consciousness and its classification. So may all of you be able to understand thought process, viti, clearly how it operates, and know the significance of the 7 swift consciousness that produce wholesome kusala karma or unwholesome akusala karma, which will determine the future roadmap of your life and the life after. And may you be able to have a proper and right attitude to guide yourself on the journey. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you very much.